Contact. The medical bay of the Imperial vessel Dominant Surge was silent save for the rhythmic hum of monitoring equipment. Lieutenant Commander Vex'tral lay motionless, his chitinous exoskeleton bearing scorch marks and hastily applied regenerative patches. 4 sets of compound eyes watched him from the doorway. The ship's captain, the chief medical officer, the intelligence director, and the mission coordinator. "How long has he been like this?" Captain Zivana asked, her mandibles clicking softly. 3 cycles, replied Medical Officer Kren. "Physically, he's recovering well. But he hasn't spoken a single word since the rescue shuttle picked him up." Intelligence Director Mokhtar moved closer to the bed, his sleek black carapace reflecting the bay's blue lighting. "He's the only survivor. The only one who made it back from Earth. We need to know what happened down there." "The neural scans show no physical damage to his speech centers," Kren continued. "Whatever keeps him silent is psychological, not physiological." Vex'tral's antenna twitched at that, the first sign of consciousness he'd displayed since his return. All 4 officers froze, watching intently. "Commander Vex'tral," Mission Coordinator Pelvox spoke, stepping forward. "We need your report. What happened to your team? What did you discover about the humans?" Vex'tral's outer membranes flickered, a sign of distress among the Artaxis species. His mandibles clicked once, then fell still again. The silence stretched on. "Perhaps he needs more time," Captain Zivana suggested. Director Mokhtar's antenna flattened against his head. "We don't have more time. High Command needs answers. The entire reconnaissance mission is a failure without his testimony." At the word failure, Vex'tral's body tensed visibly. His compound eyes, previously unfocused, suddenly fixed on Mokhtar with unnerving intensity. "Not a failure," Vex'tral whispered, his voice rasping with disuse. "A warning." Then, as suddenly as he'd spoken, he lapsed back into silence, turning his face away from the officers. 12 cycles earlier, mission briefing chamber, Imperial vessel Dominant Surge. "Humans," Mission Coordinator Pelvox announced, activating the holographic display in the center of the briefing room. "A bipedal endoskeletal species from the 3rd planet of an unremarkable yellow star system. 20 elite reconnaissance officers, including Lieutenant Commander Vex'tral, watched as the hologram depicted a standard human male and female. Their soft, vulnerable bodies rotated slowly in the display, key biological features highlighted and annotated. They are, by all conventional metrics, unimpressive," Pelvox continued. "Category IOE intelligence, indicating basic spacefaring capabilities but limited to their own solar system. Physically weak by our standards. A single adult Artaxis soldier possesses approximately 4 times the strength of an average human. They lack natural armor, possess no redundant organs, and have extremely limited regenerative capabilities." Vex'tral studied the hologram with clinical detachment. As the team's second-in-command, it was his responsibility to understand the mission parameters thoroughly. The humans looked fragile, their skin like thin fabric stretched over a calcium scaffold. How had such creatures even achieved spaceflight? Commander Laxmore, the mission leader, raised a clawed appendage. "If they're so unremarkable, why is High Command interested in their planet?" Pelvox clicked his mandibles, a gesture equivalent to a human smile. "Resources. Earth sits on one of the richest concentrations of rare minerals in the sector, and their technological advancement curve suggests they may become problematic in 3 to 4 generations. High Command prefers to assess potential challenges early." The hologram shifted to display the mission objectives. "Land covertly on Earth's northern continental landmass. Observe human military capabilities. Collect biological samples. Assess technological advancement level. Determine potential resistance to Imperial integration. Depart without detection. You will be equipped with our most advanced stealth technology," Pelvox explained. "Your drop pods will land in a remote wilderness region, and you'll establish a forward observation post. The mission timeframe is 30 cycles. Any questions?" Vex'tral's antenna twitched in thought. "Our intelligence seems limited. When was the last comprehensive survey of this species? 300 cycles ago, Pelvox admitted. But our long-range observations show no significant evolutionary changes. They're still using combustion engines and primitive fission energy. Their most advanced weapons are ballistic projectiles and basic guided explosives. Primitives, scoffed Laxmore. This will be the easiest reconnaissance in cycles. The first shots came seconds later, not the ineffective ballistic projectiles they had been briefed to expect, but high-velocity rounds that actually penetrated the outer layer of Artax's armor. Specialist Trin collapsed, green fluid seeping from his thorax. Vex'tral fired back with his plasma rifle, the weapon's discharge illuminating the darkened forest. One human fell, but the others scattered with alarming speed, taking cover behind trees and continuing to fire with remarkable accuracy. Through his tactical display, Vex'tral saw Laxmore's team racing back toward their position, pursued by what appeared to be at least 12 more humans. Their intelligence had not only underestimated human technology, but their tactical abilities as well. Fall back to secondary position, Vex'tral ordered, covering fire for the commander's team. What should have been a simple extraction turned into chaos. The humans moved like they could see through the Artax's camouflage, flanking positions that should have been invisible to them. Worse, when hit with plasma rounds, they didn't always stay down. Vex'tral witnessed a human soldier take a glancing shot to the shoulder, an injury that would incapacitate most species, then roll behind cover and continue firing one-handed, the damaged limb hanging uselessly at his side. By the time Laxmore reached the observation post, 3 more Artax's soldiers had fallen. The commander's team was down to 3, including Laxmore himself, who was missing a limb and leaking vital fluids. What happened? Vex'tral demanded, dragging his superior behind a fallen tree as plasma and projectile fire crisscrossed above them. Laxmore's compound eyes were clouded with pain and confusion. They saw us. Impossible. But they saw us. We were observing their settlement when sensors detected active scanning. Before we could retreat, they had surrounded us. A nearby explosion showered them with debris. The humans were using more than just projectile weapons now. They're calling for reinforcements, shouted security specialist Grev, who was monitoring the human communications. Many more coming. Vex'tral made a rapid tactical assessment. Their mission was completely compromised. Of the original 20, only 11 remained operational, and at least 3 of those had serious injuries. Abort mission, he ordered. Emergency extraction protocol. Return to drop pods. As the surviving Artax's soldiers began a fighting retreat through the forest, Vex'tral experienced something he had never felt in combat before: genuine fear. These humans were nothing like their intelligence had suggested. They were organized, adaptable, and possessed a disturbing ability to continue fighting despite injuries that should have been debilitating. And as the sound of approaching human aircraft reached his audio receptors, Vex'tral realized with growing horror that their mission had not just failed, it had awakened something dangerous. The real terror, however, was yet to come. Confrontation. Present day. Medical Bay. Imperial vessel dominant surge. He spoke. Captain Zivana said, mandibles clicking with excitement. That's progress. Medical Officer Kren adjusted the monitoring equipment attached to Vex'tral's scared exoskeleton. A single phrase after 3 cycles of silence hardly constitutes meaningful communication. Intelligence Director Malktar paced the length of the medical bay, his agitation evident in the rapid twitching of his antenna. We need more than cryptic warnings. The High Council is demanding answers. How did an elite reconnaissance team get reduced to a single survivor? What capabilities do these humans possess that we fail to anticipate? Perhaps a different approach is needed, suggested a new voice. All heads turned toward the doorway where military psychologist Enza stood, her sleek carapace bearing the distinctive markings of the scientific caste. Enza was renowned throughout the fleet for her ability to recover information from traumatized soldiers. Director Malktar. She continued, your interrogation methods are clearly ineffective. Commander Vex'tral has experienced something that has fundamentally altered his perception. Direct questioning will only reinforce his psychological barriers. Noctar's outer membranes darkened with annoyance. "And what do you suggest, psychologist?" "Let me work with him alone," Enza replied. "No recording devices, no observers. Just honest communication between two servants of the Empire." After a moment of tense silence, Captain Ziv-Anna nodded. "You have one cycle, psychologist. If he hasn't provided usable intelligence by then, we'll resort to neural extraction." The officers filed out, leaving Enza alone with the silent Vex'tral. She moved a comfort pad beside his recovery platform and settled her 6 limbs into a relaxed posture. "I'm not here to interrogate you, Commander," she said softly. "I'm here to understand." Vex'tral's compound eyes focused on her briefly, then drifted away. "I've reviewed the mission parameters," Enza continued. 20 of our finest soldiers, equipped with our most advanced technology, sent to observe what was supposed to be a primitive species. Yet only you returned." She paused, noting the subtle tensing of Vex'tral's limbs. "Whatever you saw on Earth changed you," she said. "Changed your understanding of humans, perhaps even your understanding of warfare itself. That kind of paradigm shift is traumatic. The mind protects itself through silence." Vex'tral's antenna quivered almost imperceptibly. "I'm not asking you to speak," Enza said. "Not yet. But I am asking you to remember. Return to Earth in your mind. Walk me through what happened after the initial ambush." For several long moments, Vex'tral remained motionless. Then, slowly, his outer membranes began to flicker with the distinctive pattern of deep memory recall. Earth. Northern Territories forest. 11 cycles earlier. The retreat through the dense forest had become a desperate fight for survival. Of the 11 Artaxis soldiers who had begun the withdrawal, only 8 remained. Commander Laxmore had succumbed to his injuries despite emergency field treatment, his final words a confused murmur about impossible resistance. Vex'tral now led the survivors, pushing them to their physical limits as they raced toward their drop pods. The human pursuers had fallen behind temporarily, but their communications, now partially decoded by the team's remaining technical specialist, indicated that they had called for significant reinforcements. "Air support incoming," warned Specialist Grev, monitoring the human transmissions. "Multiple vehicles, heavily armed." "How long until they reach our position?" Vex'tral demanded. "Approximately 18 minutes," Grev replied. "But that's not our only problem. They've somehow located our drop pods." Vex'tral's compound eyes dimmed with the implications. Their extraction point was compromised. The mission parameters included a self-destruct protocol for the pods if discovered, to prevent human acquisition of advanced technology. "New plan," he decided. "We cannot return to the pods. We need to reach the secondary extraction point on the coastal region, 3 days' march from here." The team's medical officer, Tasp, clicked her mandibles in concern. "3 of us require immediate medical attention beyond what I can provide in the field. They won't survive a 3-day march." Vex'tral faced the hardest decision of his military career. Standard protocol dictated leaving the severely wounded behind with mercy termination, a quick, painless end rather than abandonment to an enemy species. But something about these humans made him hesitate. The way they fought, their unexpected technological sophistication. "We all go," he finally declared. "No one gets left behind." The irony of adopting what he would later learn was a core human military philosophy was lost on him at the time. They traveled through the night, using their superior night vision to navigate the unfamiliar terrain. By dawn, they had put significant distance between themselves and their pursuers, reaching a small human structure nestled against a mountainside. "Unoccupied," reported Scout Nev after a careful inspection. "Appears to be some kind of seasonal dwelling. Basic amenities but no communications technology." "We'll rest here briefly," Vex'tral decided. "Treat the wounded, recharge power cells, then continue toward the extraction point." The interior of the human structure was cramped for their larger frames, but it offered protection from aerial detection. Vex'tral stationed guards at all potential entry points, while medical officer Tasp attended to the injured. "Commander," Tasp called softly after examining the worst cases. "Specialist Krell and security officer Lim won't survive without advanced medical intervention. Their internal injuries are too severe." Vex'tral moved to where the two soldiers lay. Their normally iridescent exoskeletons had dulled to a matte gray, a sign of approaching death. Both were conscious, their compound eyes tracking his movement. "Commander," Krell whispered, her voice barely audible. "The humans, they're not what we thought." "Save your strength," Vex'tral replied. "No," she insisted. "You need to know. When they shot me, I was using active camouflage, perfect concealment, but they aimed directly at me. It was like they could sense my presence." Before Vex'tral could respond, Scout Nev burst into the room. "Commander, human vehicles approaching. At least 4 ground transports." Vex'tral moved quickly to the viewing portal. Through the transparent material, he could see a narrow dirt path winding up the mountainside. 4 bulky human vehicles with distinctive military markings were ascending the path, moving with deliberate purpose. "How did they find us?" wondered weapons specialist Zin. "We've maintained stealth protocols. No energy signatures, no trail." "It doesn't matter how," Vex'tral said grimly. "They're here. Defensive positions, non-lethal measures if possible. We need to capture one for questioning." The team scrambled to secure the small structure, overturning furniture to create barricades and positioning themselves to cover all entry points. Vex'tral knelt beside the dying soldiers. "Krell, Lim," he said softly, "I cannot ask you to fight in your condition." Security officer Lim's mandibles clicked weakly. "We serve the Empire to our last breath, Commander." Vex'tral hesitated, then presented each with a plasma pistol. "May your ancestors guide your aim." Outside, the human vehicles had stopped 100 meters from the structure. Soldiers deployed in a textbook containment formation, establishing a perimeter with overlapping fields of fire. Vex'tral observed their movements with growing unease. These were not the actions of a Category IOI intelligent species. The humans moved with practiced precision that spoke of extensive combat experience. A human voice, amplified by some device, called out in their own language. The team's translation software processed the message. "Attention unknown entities. We have detected your presence. We are prepared to communicate peacefully if that is your intention. Otherwise, we are authorized to use lethal force. You have 2 minutes to respond." "They're offering communication," technical specialist Grev said, surprise evident in his voice. "That suggests they recognize us as intelligent beings. Or it's a tactic to make us reveal ourselves," countered weapons specialist Zin. Vex'tral considered their options. Their mission was completely compromised. Standard protocol would be to fight to the death rather than allow capture, but he was responsible for the lives of his remaining team members. "Specialist Grev," he ordered, "prepare a universal greeting message. Basic concepts only. We come in peace. We were observing. We will depart." As Grev began composing the message, Scout Nev suddenly stiffened by the side viewing portal. "Commander, they're deploying some kind of device." Vex'tral moved to look. Several humans were setting up tripod-mounted equipment around the perimeter of their position. "Scanning technology," he wondered aloud. "Unknown," replied technical specialist Grev. "But it's emitting electromagnetic radiation on frequencies that interfere with our camouflage systems." The implications were clear and disturbing. The humans had somehow developed technology specifically designed to counter their stealth capabilities, technology that shouldn't have been possible at their development level. Before Vex'tral could formulate a new plan, the decision was made for them. One of the tripod devices emitted a pulse that washed over the structure. Instantly, all their adaptive camouflage systems failed, rendering them visible. "They see us," shouted Scout Nev. The human response was immediate. A barrage of weapons fire struck the structure, surprisingly effective against what should have been superior Artaxis construction materials. Windows shattered, walls splintered, and several rounds penetrated deep enough to ricochet inside the dwelling. "Return fire," Vex'tral ordered. "Defensive positions." What followed was the most intense combat of Vex'tral's military career. The humans attacked with a combination of direct fire and coordinated movement that spoke of extensive battlefield experience. Worse, they seemed to adapt their tactics in real time, quickly identifying the most effective points to concentrate their fire. Weapons specialist Zin fell first, a cluster of high-velocity rounds finding the seam between his thoracic and abdominal plates. Scout Nev was next, caught by an explosive device that shattered her exoskeleton. The dying specialists, Krell and Lim, provided covering fire from their positions, accounting for 3 human casualties before their systems finally failed. Through it all, Vex'tral observed the humans with growing astonishment. When wounded, they didn't retreat as expected. Instead, they seemed to fight with even greater intensity. One human, clearly injured in the upper limb, switched his weapon to his undamaged appendage and continued firing with remarkable accuracy. "We need to break contact," Medical Officer Tasp shouted over the cacophony of weapons fire. "This position is indefensible." Vex'tral knew she was right. They were down to 4 functioning soldiers now. Himself, Tasp, Grev, and Engineer Mok. "Rear exit," he ordered. "Engineer Mok, prepare a distraction." Mok quickly assembled a makeshift explosive device from components in his field kit. "Ready, Commander." "On my mark," Vex'tral said. 3, 2, 1, mark. Mok hurled the device through a shattered window. The resulting explosion wasn't particularly powerful, but it created a blinding flash and a thunderous noise, enough to momentarily disrupt the human assault. In that brief window, the 4 surviving Artaxis soldiers burst from the rear of the structure, racing for the cover of the dense forest beyond. They'd barely made it 10 meters when the humans reoriented their attack. Vex'tral felt, rather than heard the impact as a projectile struck Engineer Mok beside him. The engineer stumbled, green fluid spraying from a wound in his central thorax. "Leave me," Mok gasped, his legs already failing. "Complete the mission." In that moment, Vex'tral witnessed something that would haunt him forever after. As Mok fell, a human soldier broke from cover and raced toward the wounded engineer, weapon raised. Vex'tral, Tasp, and Grev all fired, their plasma weapons striking the human simultaneously. The human should have died instantly. Instead, though clearly gravely wounded, he continued forward, reached the fallen engineer, and detonated some kind of explosive device strapped to his body. The blast killed both Mok and the human soldier. "He sacrificed himself," Technical Specialist Grev whispered in disbelief. "Knowingly." "Keep moving," Vex'tral ordered, pulling Grev and Tasp toward the forest's edge. They ran until their limbs threatened to buckle beneath them, the sounds of pursuit gradually fading behind. When they finally stopped to assess their situation, the grim reality was undeniable. Of 20 elite reconnaissance soldiers, only 3 remained. "Commander," Technical Specialist Grev said, his voice hollow with exhaustion. "I've been analyzing the human communications we intercepted. There's something you need to know." Vex'tral turned to the specialist, noting the uncharacteristic vibration in his antenna, a sign of extreme distress. "This wasn't their primary military force," Grev explained. "These were what they call special forces, a small percentage of their military selected for enhanced capabilities. And based on their communications, they've already transmitted data about us up their command chain." Medical Officer Tasp's outer membranes paled. "They know about us now. They know we exist. Worse," Grev continued. "They referred to us with a term I didn't understand at first, xenomorphs. It's from their scientific classification system. It means they already have theoretical frameworks for extraterrestrial life. They were prepared for this possibility." Vex'tral processed this information slowly, his compound eyes dimming with the implications. Everything they'd been told about humans was wrong. These weren't primitive beings fumbling toward the stars. They were a species with unexpected technological sophistication, extraordinary combat abilities, and perhaps most disturbingly, a readiness for extraterrestrial contact. The three survivors looked at each other, each realizing the same thing. Their mission had not just failed, it had potentially triggered something far worse than they could have imagined. And they still had to traverse 50 kilometers of hostile territory to reach the secondary extraction point. We move at night, Vex'tral decided. Avoid all contact. Reach the extraction point at all costs. The Empire needs to know what we're dealing with. None of them could have predicted what the next day would bring. An encounter that would leave Vex'tral as the sole survivor, bearing a warning that would change the Artaxis Imperium forever. Present day, Medical Bay, Imperial Vessel Dominant Surge. Psychologist Enza sat motionless as Vex'tral's outer membranes continued to flicker with memory patterns. Though he hadn't spoken aloud, his body language told volumes about what he had experienced. "You've been carrying this burden alone," she said softly. "The loss of your team. The discovery that everything we thought we knew about humans was wrong." Vex'tral's compound eyes focused on her for the first time since she'd entered the medical bay. "But there's more, isn't there?" Enza continued. "Something happened after the engagement at the human dwelling. Something that truly terrified you." Vex'tral's mandibles clicked once, then twice. A gesture of profound distress. Comprehension. Present day. High Command Chamber, Imperial Vessel Dominant Surge. The High Command Chamber had never been so silent. 7 of the Empire's most senior military leaders sat motionless around the holographic display, their compound eyes fixed on Lieutenant Commander Vex'tral. Behind him stood military psychologist Enza, her posture rigid with tension. Grand Admiral Kexan, the highest-ranking officer present, broke the silence first, his aged mandibles clicking softly. "You understand, Commander, why this testimony is difficult for us to accept. You're asking us to fundamentally recategorize a species based solely on your experience." Vex'tral stood unwavering, his scared exoskeleton a testament to the truth of his account. "With respect, Admiral, I'm not asking. I'm mourning. The humans are not what we believe them to be. If we proceed with the planned resource acquisition mission, we will be initiating a conflict we cannot win." Fleet Commander Drav leaned forward, his polished carapace reflecting the chamber's soft blue lighting. "Bold words, Commander. You claim that humans, a species with rudimentary space travel and primitive weaponry, pose an existential threat to an empire that spans 47 star systems." "Yes," Vex'tral replied without hesitation. "Because you're making the same mistake I made. You're judging them by conventional metrics of technological advancement and physical capabilities. Those metrics do not apply to humans." Intelligence Director Malktar, who had been silent until now, tapped a control panel. The holographic display in the center of the chamber activated, showing the standard biological assessment of humans that Vex'tral had viewed before his mission. "Our intelligence is comprehensive, Commander," Malktar said. "Humans are Category II in all relevant metrics. Their projectile weapons cannot penetrate our advanced armor. Their aircraft are subsonic. They have yet to establish permanent settlements beyond their own moon." Vex'tral's antenna flattened against his head in frustration. "Your intelligence is 300 cycles old. It fails to account for their unprecedented rate of technological advancement. More importantly, it completely misunderstands their fundamental nature." Military psychologist Enza stepped forward. "High Command, I've spent the last cycle in intensive sessions with Commander Vex'tral. I verified his psychological state. He is not suffering from post-combat stress distortion. His account, while extraordinary, is consistent and specific." Grand Admiral Kexan's outer membranes flickered thoughtfully. "Very well. Commander Vex'tral, tell us what happened during the final confrontation. Tell us about these broken ones." Vex'tral's compound eyes dimmed momentarily, as if revisiting a nightmare. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of profound trauma. After the engagement at the human dwelling, there were only 3 of us left. Myself, medical officer tasked, and technical specialist Grev. We traveled only at night, hiding during daylight hours. We made good progress toward the extraction point for the first day. Earth, Northern Territories forest. 10 cycles earlier, the 3 surviving Artax's soldiers moved silently through the moonlit forest. Their adaptive camouflage systems had been damaged in the previous combat, rendering them only partially effective. They relied now on natural cover and the darkness to conceal their movement. 42 kilometers to extraction point, technical specialist Grev reported, consulting his navigation device. At current pace, we should arrive in approximately 38 hours. Medical officer Task moved with uncharacteristic stiffness, one of her limbs partially immobilized by a projectile wound. The humans have established search patterns, she noted, monitoring intercepted communications. Concentric circles expanding from our last known position. They're being methodical. Vex'tral paused, his sensory antenna sampling the night air. They're learning our movement patterns too quickly. We need to be unpredictable. Commander, Grev said hesitantly, I've been analyzing the data from our encounters. The humans demonstrate tactical adaptability far beyond Category IA parameters. Their learning curve is concerning. Explain, Vex'tral ordered as they resumed their careful advance. In our first engagement, their projectile weapons were minimally effective against our armor. By the second engagement, they had adjusted their ammunition to target joint seams and visual organs. They identified and exploited weaknesses after a single encounter. Task's mandibles clicked nervously. That suggests either extensive pre-existing knowledge about our physiology or unprecedented observational capabilities. Or both, Vex'tral added grimly. They continued in silence for several hours, making good progress through the dense vegetation. Dawn was approaching when Grev suddenly froze, his antenna rigid with alarm. Commander, multiple heat signatures approaching from the east and south. Moving fast. Vex'tral instantly assessed their options. Elevated position, southwest. We'll use the high ground. The 3 soldiers changed direction, moving as rapidly as their injuries allowed toward a rocky outcropping visible through the trees. They had nearly reached it when the forest behind them erupted with weapons fire. Go! Vex'tral shouted, returning fire to cover his companion's ascent. Task reached the rocks first, taking the defensive position and providing covering fire as Grev scrambled up beside her. Vex'tral was halfway up the slope when a projectile struck his lower left limb, shattering the joint. Pain lanced through his nervous system, but Vex'tral's combat training held. He continued climbing, green fluid seeping from the wounded limb. From their elevated position, they had a momentary advantage. The humans would have to cross open ground to reach them, exposing themselves to fire. How many? Vex'tral asked, positioning himself behind a boulder. I count 12 heat signatures, Grev replied. Wait. They'd stopped advancing. Vex'tral peered cautiously around his cover. Through the pre-dawn gloom, he could see human figures at the tree line, approximately 80 meters away. They weren't charging as expected, but had established a perimeter. They're containing us, he realized, waiting for reinforcements. Commander, Task said urgently. Aerial vehicle approaching from the north. Fast. The sound reached them moments later, a rhythmic chopping noise unlike anything in their experience. Through the canopy, they glimpsed a dark shape moving rapidly toward their position. It's some kind of aircraft, Grev reported, but the configuration doesn't match anything in our database. The strange craft hovered above the forest canopy, its powerful downdraft bending the treetops. A blindingly bright light suddenly illuminated their position, stripping away the protection of darkness. Weapons free, Vex'tral ordered. Target the aircraft. All 3 soldiers fired their plasma weapons simultaneously. 2 shots missed in the confusion, but Grev struck the craft's underside. Instead of exploding as expected, the aircraft wobbled momentarily, then stabilized. Its exterior had somehow absorbed or deflected energy that should have been catastrophic. "Impossible," whispered Grev. The aircraft's response was immediate and devastating. Something detached from its underside, a cylindrical object that plummeted toward their position. "Explosive," Vex'tral shouted. "Take cover." The blast was unlike anything in his combat experience. Not just concussive force and heat, but something else, a strange mist that filled the air around them. Vex'tral's respiratory filters triggered automatically, but too late. Whatever the substance was, it had already entered his system. "Chemical agent," Tasp gasped, her medical training immediately recognizing the threat. "Neural disruptor, targeting our specific biology." Vex'tral watched in horror as Tasp collapsed, her limbs convulsing uncontrollably. Beside her, Grev was already down, his compound eyes rolling wildly in their sockets. Vex'tral fought against the creeping numbness spreading through his body. How had the humans developed a chemical agent specifically targeted to Artax's physiology? They'd had no prior contact, no biological samples, unless they had recovered and analyzed the bodies of his fallen comrades. That realization struck Vex'tral with terrible clarity just as his own limbs began to fail him. He collapsed beside his companions, consciousness fading as human figures approached their position. His last thought before darkness claimed him was one of profound dismay. These humans were not just dangerous. They were terrifyingly adaptable. Consciousness returned slowly, fragmentary. Vex'tral first became aware of bright light against his compound eyes, then the sensation of restraints around his limbs. He was secured to some kind of examination platform, unable to move. Subject 3 showing signs of consciousness. A human voice stood nearby. The words processed through Vex'tral's translation implant. "Notify Colonel Reeves." Vex'tral kept his outer membrane still, feigning continued unconsciousness while he assessed his situation. His sensory antenna detected multiple human presences in the room, along with unfamiliar chemical scents and the hum of electronic equipment. "What about the other two?" asked a different human voice. "Subject 1 expired during transport. Subject 2 remains in critical condition. This one seems to be their leader, based on armor markings and the respect behaviors the others displayed toward it." Vex'tral suppressed a surge of grief. Tast was dead. Grev critical. The mission was a complete disaster. "Don't get too close," warned the first voice. "Colonel Reeves wants them intact for questioning." "You think it understands us?" asked the second voice, now closer to Vex'tral. "The neural activity suggests advanced cognition, and they clearly have technology far beyond ours. I'd be surprised if they don't have some form of translation capability." The door opened, and Vex'tral sensed a new presence entering the room, a human that radiated authority. The other humans straightened noticeably. "Report," said a commanding voice. "Subject 3 is regaining consciousness, Colonel. Vital signs stable but showing evidence of combat injuries predating capture." "And the intel team's assessment?" "Confirmed, sir. The recovered technology from their dead suggests an interstellar civilization with capabilities significantly beyond our own. The specimens appear to be part of a military reconnaissance unit." There was a long silence, during which Vex'tral felt himself being studied intently. "I know you're conscious," the authoritative voice finally said, addressing Vex'tral directly. "And I suspect you understand me. I am Colonel James Reeves, United Earth Defense Force. You are being detained following an unprovoked attack on human territory." Vex'tral remained motionless, still feigning unconsciousness. "We recovered the bodies of your comrades," Reeves continued. "We've studied your technology, your biology. We know you're part of an advanced spacefaring species. What we don't know is why you're here." Still, Vex'tral maintained his deception. Revealing his consciousness would only accelerate whatever the humans planned for him. "I'm going to be direct," Reeves said. "Earth has suspected the existence of extraterrestrial intelligence for decades. We've prepared for this possibility. The fact that your first contact involved a covert military insertion suggests hostile intent. The colonel moved closer, his voice lowering. Your companion, what we're calling Subject 2, is dying. Our medical teams don't have sufficient understanding of your biology to save him. If you cooperate, share information about your physiology, perhaps we can help. The mention of Grev sent a surge of conflict through Vex'tral's mind. His duty to the Empire demanded silence, but his loyalty to his last surviving teammate pulled in the opposite direction. Before he could decide, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. Colonel, a panicked voice called over some communication system. Subject 2 has escaped containment. The transmission cut off with a burst of static. Lockdown protocols. Now. Reeves barked. All personnel, Level 4 security measures. The humans rushed from the room, leaving Vex'tral alone, still secured to the examination platform. The facility around him erupted into chaos. Shouts, weapons fire, the sound of metal tearing. Minutes passed in bewildering confusion. Then, abruptly, the door to Vex'tral's room was wrenched open. Standing in the doorway was technical specialist Grev, but not as Vex'tral had ever seen him. Grev's exoskeleton was cracked in multiple places, green fluid seeping from wounds that should have been debilitating. One of his visual organs was completely destroyed, another clouded with damage. 2 of his 6 limbs hung uselessly at awkward angles. Yet he moved with terrifying purpose, crossing to Vex'tral's platform and tearing apart the restraints with strength that no injured Artaxis should possess. Grev, Vex'tral said, abandoning his pretense of unconsciousness. How? No time, Grev interrupted, his voice a harsh rasp. Extraction point. Must reach. As Grev helped Vex'tral from the platform, the commander noticed something disturbing. Grev's outer membranes were fluctuating wildly between colors that indicated extreme pain and something Vex'tral had never seen before, a deep, pulsing crimson that existed in no known emotional spectrum of their species. You're injured, Vex'tral stated, supporting himself on his functioning limbs. How are you even mobile? Grev's functioning eye fixed on him with unnerving intensity. Learned from humans. Pain is irrelevant. Mission paramount. Vex'tral felt a chill through his carapace. This wasn't the methodical, analytical, technical specialist he knew. Something fundamental had changed in Grev. They moved into the corridor, encountering signs of Grev's passage. Shattered equipment, damaged walls, and 2 human bodies lying motionless on the floor. Did you kill them? Vex'tral asked, shock evident in his voice. Their mission parameters strictly forbade lethal force except in immediate self-defense. Grev didn't respond, moving with single-minded purpose toward what appeared to be an exit. Behind them, Vex'tral could hear human security forces regrouping, preparing to pursue. How did you escape? Vex'tral asked as they reached a door leading outside. Observe humans, Grev replied cryptically. When injured, they change, become stronger, different. I changed too. The door opened to reveal a forested area surrounding some kind of military installation. Night had fallen during their captivity, providing some cover for their escape. They had barely made it 50 meters into the trees when the first projectile struck around them. Human security forces had emerged from the facility, weapons firing. Run, Grev said, pushing Vex'tral ahead. Complete mission. Warn Empire. Not without you. Vex'tral insisted, the Artaxis equivalent of the human concept Grev had apparently adopted. 2 damage, Grev replied. His functioning eye swiveled to Vex'tral. We'll delay them. Give you time. Before Vex'tral could protest, Grev turned back toward their pursuers. What happened next would haunt Vex'tral's memory forever. Technical specialist Grev, a scientist, not a combat specialist, charged directly at the human security forces. His broken body moved with impossible speed, ignoring the projectiles that tore through his already damaged exoskeleton. He reached the first line of humans and tore into them with the frenzied strength of a being who had completely abandoned self-preservation. It was horrifying. It was mesmerizing. It was entirely contrary to everything Vex'tral understood about Artax's combat doctrine. It was, he realized with dawning horror, exactly how the humans fought. Somehow, in his captivity, in his desperate state, Grev had adopted the most terrifying aspect of human combat psychology, the ability to override survival instincts, to fight beyond all rational limits. Vex'tral watched for only moments before his own training reasserted itself. Grev's sacrifice demanded that he complete the mission. He turned and fled into the forest, the sounds of combat fading behind him. For 3 days, Vex'tral evaded human search parties. He traveled only at night, used natural waterways to mask his trail, and employed every stealth technique in his extensive training. His damaged limb made progress slow and painful, but the memory of Grev's sacrifice drove him forward. When he finally reached the extraction point, a concealed emergency beacon hidden along a remote coastal area, he was barely functional. As the automated recovery craft broke atmosphere to retrieve him, Vex'tral looked back at the planet that had claimed 19 of his comrades. He understood now what made humans truly dangerous. It wasn't their technology, which was indeed advancing at an alarming rate. It wasn't even their adaptability or unexpected tactical acumen. It was something far more fundamental, their relationship with their own limitations, where Artax's soldiers were trained to recognize and respect biological constraints. Humans seemed to view theirs as challenges to overcome, through technology, through sheer determination, or through a psychological state that transformed pain and damage from deterrence into fuel. And most terrifying of all, this quality was apparently contagious. Technical specialist Grev had somehow absorbed it, becoming something that defied Artax's understanding of combat psychology. As the recovery craft accelerated toward orbit, Vex'tral made a solemn vow to the memory of his fallen team. The Empire would understand what they had encountered. He would make them understand, no matter what it cost him personally. Present day, High Command Chamber, Imperial Vessel Dominant Surge. The chamber remained silent as Vex'tral concluded his account. The 7 high-ranking officers exchanged glances, their antennae and outer membranes betraying a complex mix of emotions: disbelief, concern, even fear. "You're suggesting," Fleet Commander Drav finally said, "that this human trait, this ability to fight beyond normal biological limitations, somehow transferred to technical specialist Grev." "I'm not suggesting it," Vex'tral replied firmly. "I witnessed it. Grev's injuries were catastrophic. No Artaxis should have been able to function with such damage, let alone fight with the ferocity he displayed." Grand Admiral Kexan's compound eyes darkened thoughtfully. "Our species has always prided itself on superior biological engineering, redundant systems, reinforced exoskeletons, regenerative capabilities. But you're describing something our evolution never selected for: the ability to override survival instincts entirely. Because it's not logical," offered Science Director Pell, speaking for the first time. "A species that routinely fights beyond sustainable biological limits should self-destruct. The energy cost alone would be prohibitive. Unless," psychologist Enza interjected, "that trait is activated selectively. Humans appear to enter this state only under extreme circumstances, when survival is already unlikely through conventional means." "It's more than that," Vex'tral insisted. "The humans have institutionalized this trait. They train for it. They have cultural frameworks that celebrate it. They've deliberately cultivated it as a military asset." Intelligence Director Malkhtar leaned forward. "If what you're saying is true, Commander, it has profound implications for our interaction protocols. A species that doesn't recognize conventional defeat parameters cannot be approached with standard military doctrine." "Precisely," Vex'tral agreed. "Any conflict with humans would not follow predictable escalation patterns. They would not surrender when defeat became statistically inevitable. They would continue fighting, adapting, sacrificing, until either total victory or complete extinction." The chamber fell silent again as the High Command absorbed the implications. Finally, Grand Admiral Kexan rose from his seat, his aged carapace gleaming under the chamber lights. "Commander Vex'tral," he said formally, "on behalf of the High Command, I thank you for your service and your testimony. You will be honored appropriately for your courage and the sacrifice of your team." The Admiral's compound eyes swept the chamber. "This session will remain classified at the highest level. No record of Commander Vex'tral's testimony will be distributed beyond this room without my direct authorization." Vex'tral's antenna drooped slightly. "Admiral, with respect, the Empire needs to understand what we're facing. If the planned resource acquisition mission proceeds—" "It will not," Kexan interrupted. "Based on your testimony and the supporting evidence, I am recommending immediate cancellation of all military operations in Earth's sector." Relief flooded through Vex'tral's system, but it was short-lived. Instead, the Admiral continued, "I am proposing something unprecedented, a formal diplomatic mission. Not a show of force, but a genuine attempt at peaceful contact." Stunned silence greeted this declaration. The Artaxis Imperium had never initiated diplomatic relations with a species it could potentially conquer. "Admiral," protested Fleet Commander Drav, "these humans killed 18 of our elite reconnaissance soldiers. They reverse engineer our technology within days. They're volatile, unpredictable, and now they know we exist. Diplomacy seems naive." "Perhaps," Kexan acknowledged, "but Commander Vex'tral's testimony suggests something I find more compelling than the humans' capacity for violence. Their capacity for adaptation. They identified our weaknesses, developed countermeasures, and even created specialized chemical agents targeting our biology, all within an astonishingly brief time frame." The Admiral's outer membranes took on the deep blue of profound consideration. "An enemy that adaptable would eventually overcome any technological advantage we possess, but an ally with such capabilities, that presents possibilities too significant to ignore." Vex'tral found himself nodding slowly. "They fight beyond reason when threatened. But I observed something else as well. They protected each other with the same fervor. Their concept of leaving no one behind suggests a social cohesion that might extend to allies." "Precisely," said Kexan. "Commander Vex'tral, you have given us a warning, but also an opportunity. The question now is how to approach a species that reacts to threats by becoming more dangerous, not less." "Carefully," Vex'tral replied. "Very carefully." 6 cycles later, Earth orbit. The diplomatic vessel Peaceful Discourse decelerated into Earth orbit, its hull bearing no weapons, its systems broadcasting on all frequencies used by human communication networks. On the bridge, Ambassador Televar watched the blue-green planet with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. Beside him stood military advisor Vex'tral, recently promoted in recognition of his service. "They're responding to our transmission," reported communications officers in. "Multiple Earth governments are coordinating a unified response." As anticipated, Vex'tral noted, "They've had time to prepare since our initial contact." The main view screen activated, showing the human female in formal attire. Behind her stood a diverse group of humans, including one Vex'tral recognized immediately, Colonel James Reeves. "This is Secretary General Chen of the United Earth Council," the human announced. "We are receiving your transmission clearly. Your stated peaceful intentions are acknowledged, but given our previous encounter, we approach with caution." Ambassador Televar stepped forward. "We understand your caution, Secretary General. Our previous mission was a grave error in judgment, one we deeply regret. We come now in genuine peace, seeking dialogue rather than conflict." The humans studied them carefully before responding. "Your ship will remain in its current orbit. We will send a delegation to meet with you on neutral ground, our International Space Station. Will you agree to these terms?" "We will," Telvar confirmed. As preparations began for the historic meeting, Vex'tral moved to a viewport, gazing down at the planet that had changed everything he thought he knew about warfare and species classification. "Do you think this will work?" Ambassador Televar asked quietly, joining him. Vex'tral's compound eyes reflected the blue glow of Earth. I don't know, but I understand humans better now. They respond to respect with respect, to threats with unimaginable resilience. If we approach them as equals, acknowledge their unique capabilities. And if not, Televar pressed. If diplomacy fails. Vex'tral's scared hand unconsciously moved to the synthetic replacement for his damaged limb. Then we pray to our ancestors that we never face them in open warfare. Because what I learned on Earth, what cost 19 elite soldiers their lives, is that humans don't just fight to win. They fight until they physically cannot fight anymore. The ambassador's antenna quivered with concern. And that point is far beyond what any rational species would consider possible. Vex'tral finished. As the peaceful discourse prepared to receive the human delegation, Vex'tral found himself hoping that this encounter would begin a new chapter in interspecies relations, one defined by mutual respect rather than the terrible lesson he had learned in Earth's forests. Because he knew with absolute certainty that an enemy that grows stronger through adversity is not an enemy the Empire could afford to make. The end.